Good afternoon, all. Sadiqa O'Brien, good afternoon to you. Christopher Coffey, 29 Super C. Happy Easter to you as well. Althea 1, Arlene Lewis, good afternoon. Margaret Thomas, Sarah Richards, good afternoon to you. Alessia Almande Rocher, good afternoon. Patricia Batiste, good afternoon. Diane Charles, hi Diane. Neil Francois, always present. Good afternoon. Helen Faria Trotman. Marilyn McAllister. Good afternoon. Wayne Pedro. Andy N4W. Victoria Bess Mitchell. Dawn Clark. Good afternoon to all of you. Right, so I'm just jumping on for a short bit today, folks, because I'm in between Easter events, having been invited to quite a few, so I'm still trying to juggle. And the next one starts in about 2 hours' time or so. So, but there are just so many things to talk about that happened since last we spoke. Never a dull moment in Sweet Tea and Tea. Crimson Studios. Anne Niles, Leon Joseph, Helen Ross, Deborah Duranty. Good afternoon to all of you. Arlene Stewart, Jefferson Clark, thank you so much. Marissa Guevara, Anaya 450, Natalie F. Good afternoon to all of you. And yes, happy Easter to all those of you who celebrate Easter, including our godly Prime Minister. I saw photos posted this morning on her Facebook page. I think she's at La Divina Pastora Church, which I think is in her constituency, accompanied by some members of her government. I saw a few of them, so we went from Hindu to Baptist to Catholic. Some people say Papi Show. I don't know. Yes, Sarah is saying the PM and her ministers jumping from church to church. Pamela Moses, hi Pamela. You see, Trisha Roger. Right, so let me jump into it because I said I have limited time today. I don't know if I'll be able to jump back on tomorrow because I have another quite a few invitations that I got that came in while I was out to, well, if I must say, the constituency of Malva Mausica is very, very busy this weekend with Easter activities, which is good. So in fact, while there were some requests for my office to host an Easter event, as the previous MP used to do, Lisa Morris Julian. I think she used to have a kite flying competition and an Easter egg hunt. But we have so many things of similar nature taking place by private citizens and NGOs and so on in the constituency. And rather than commit myself to just one event, I thought it prudent instead to support some of these, because some of the organizers of these events would have written to my office asking for support in one way or another, and we were able to oblige. And so I intend to yes, Sarah is saying Muslim too. Yes, they in everything they in, they're like salt. Yeah, so instead we would have provided some level of support to some of these events, and we would choose instead to participate. So I got back in yesterday afternoon because my flight was delayed, and straight from the airport to MP duties. So we had made arrangements to visit some constituents who were in need over the course of this weekend. Many of them who are still unemployed, months now since this government took away their jobs, and they're still looking for work. And so hampers were donated, which reminds me I have to visit somebody for some hampers. Hampers would have been donated, and we would have taken the decision, rather than to just have the hampers in the office and invite people to come, we would instead go to their homes, visit them, and deliver the hampers, which we would have topped up with certain things. So yeah, make it meaningful. It's not just to provide a meal for over this long weekend, but for perhaps even the week and beyond. So we were able to purchase chicken from Arawak and so on, stuff like butter and cheese and all of these different things that you don't normally find in a hamper to assist. Right? So we're trying to do as much as we can with the limited resources that we have. So we were out on the road until about 9 o'clock last night, because persons were expecting us. As I said, we were a little behind time through no fault of my own. The flight was delayed by over an hour because the crew that came on that flight, they were returning to Miami on the same flight, on same plane. So they didn't deplane. So I guess they decided to take a little extra rest, given the long period of time that they would be in the air. Carol Myers, my friend, good day. Alberta Sampat is saying we have a great time in Grandy from Friday to last night. Okay. Christopher Coffey is saying Thursday night I met my political leader, VPNM in Siparia. Oh, very nice. Michelle Nero, Patricia Street. Right, so the last day in Parliament, I think was the 27th. Yeah. So that was Private Members' Day, and we would have raised our second motion for Private Members' Day. The first one being shut down, as you all would recall, where we sought to raise the issue of those persons who were struggling financially because of the actions of this government, and that debate was brought to a premature end thanks to the Member of Parliament for Oropouche East. And the next motion that we would have piloted on the 27th speaks to the issue of armed police officers in some of our nation's schools, which the government is vehement on, because I guess in the absence of any other cogent, sensible plan to deal with delinquency in some of the nation's schools, they figure, well, they'll just put some armed police officers there to serve as glorified bouncers, perhaps to intimidate and frighten students into behaving themselves. And while the Prime Minister would have initially declared some measure of success in terms of seeing a reduction in fights and bullying and so on in schools, now their hands are up in the air, where recently she would have suggested that the state should now put things in place to start holding parents accountable for the actions of their children. So they're not dealing with what are the underlying causes of this delinquency and why students are behaving the way that they are, but they figure, well, let's just put a plaster on a sore, as one of my colleagues said. You're trying to kill a mosquito with a sledgehammer. But hopefully I will contribute on that motion when it continues the next Private Members' Day, which should be the last Friday in this month, because we usually not allowed, but given the time allotted from 1:30 to 6, where Private Members' Day must come to an end at 6 o'clock. If each member of we usually only able to field about 3 speakers on either side, assuming that each speaker would speak for 45 minutes. So we will see how that goes. But a matter that I raised on the adjournment had to do with the issue of shortage of the water challenges that we are facing in my constituency for the past 5 months or so. Challenges which we did not have previously, because while we may have had pockets in the constituency where we had some challenges, perhaps with low water pressure from time to time, which was the main issue. In the constituency, for years, we have had a water schedule of 3 days per week, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, which for most people was good once the water pressure is good, because a lot of people in the constituency have multiple water tanks, And so once the water pressure is good and the tanks could be filled, if water comes on a Tuesday and it stays long enough and there's sufficient pressure, I mean, whatever you use between on Wednesday and then water comes again on Thursday, so you replenish, and then you have Friday, Saturday, again you replenish. So it's been working until these people came into office. And the man who is now the Minister of Public Utilities, who is in charge of WASA, who for the 10 years under the PNM was the de facto waterman, right? He was the defender for everything that had to do with water. Every time he opened his mouth, a camera is in his face, or there's a microphone in his face. Everything is water and water and water. So you would have swear that he had the solution for every water problem, because the PNM, they blame the PNM for everything is aging infrastructure and the lack of will and this government problems. The PNM doesn't know how to fix the issue, despite all that was done by the member for Aruca, Lupino, Marvin Gonzalez, when he was Minister of Public Utilities. The number of water, new booster stations that would have been initiated, like probably about 30 or so, right? In addition to the replacement of lines, I recall when Marvin first became Minister of Public Utilities, there had been a long-standing issue. I think it was in St. Anne's with one of those large storage tanks, and which had not been in use for years. And he came in and he was able to investigate the problem, and it was solved. We recall the problem that they had down in, was it Lengua Indian Walk or Mondiablo, Quenam Mondiablo, where the PNM would have seen a significant increase in the number of votes. Remember when there was a tie in the local election in 2023, and then there was a by-election. Well, yeah, because to break the tie, and the PNM would have gotten 600 additional votes, and the UNC would have seen a reduction in their vote count from the initial election of about 26 votes or something like that. And what was attributed to that, in part, was the work that Marvin had done to break the back of the water corruption scandal that was taking place, the water trucking scandal, where a district that fell under UNC, in a UNC constituency, under a UNC corporation, Kuvatavakita Alparo Regional Corporation. And for years, people were spending thousands of dollars to buy water when it was a simple fix. And Marvin went there as a PNM, well, he went there as the Minister of Public Utilities under a PNM administration in a UNC constituency, right? Because all they were complaining about geographic discrimination and so on for the decade under the PNM. He gave a commitment to the people he would solve the problem in 30 days, and he did it in 21 days. And the people were able to get water and no longer had to be spending thousands of dollars paying WASA and then paying for trucked water as well. But they forget all of that. So the problem had become quite acute and still is in my constituency. And I was advised to raise a motion on the adjournment to treat with that, where I would be afforded some 10 minutes to speak about the challenges that we are facing and have been facing for the last 5 months in my constituency and the numerous complaints that we get. So I don't know how many of you would have been able to see my contribution, but if you haven't, it's on my constituency Facebook page. So you could check it out there, or you could visit on the Parliament channel on YouTube. But when I was finished speaking, the minister, in response to me, and the member for the Gomartin Northeast, Colin Membert, would have raised a similar issue just before me. The two matters on the adjournment dealt with challenges we face for water in our respective constituencies. And when the minister responded to me, the first thing he started to talk about was my fixation on pipe. So I spoke for about 6 or so minutes, and the only thing he got from my contribution was my mention of how in the year between 1995 and 2000, the then UNC administration promised water for all by the year 2000, which they failed to deliver on. And I reminded them that the now Prime Minister, then, I don't know if she was Attorney General or Minister of Education or whatever, made that infamous speech about Ganga Singh drop pipe, and more pipe. And I can't tell all the size of that pipe because I ain't see it yet. And the only pipe I know about is Dr. Bisasa pipe. So I made mention of that to remind them. And that's, for some reason, that's the only thing the main thing he gleaned from my contribution. I wouldn't hazard a guess as to why. All right, but I will leave it there on that. But he also went on to accuse me of dishonesty in claiming a water crisis in my constituency when his information, based on whoever he spoke to, probably at WASA, was that there's no such crisis. First of all, I never used the word crisis, right? That was his word, not mine, his. But I sought to explain the challenges that we face in my constituency, based on the complaints that I've been getting from constituents, from my councillors, messages, people tagging me on Facebook to complain. I'm also part of a private group, Malabar Mausika Outreach Group, where persons would post their complaints or their issues and so on that they may be experiencing in the constituency, to draw it to my attention. And so I felt the need to speak to it. But when, as a minister, you want to downplay what people are going through, it's most unfortunate. And I made reference to one of the persons who would have reached out. Well, a voice note that was sent out to the councillor from Malabar South, and she would have forwarded it to me to appraise me of what persons were going through and the level of frustration that they are experiencing. And I would have referenced that, albeit we are not allowed to play audio in the parliament. But as I said, what I can do there, I can do here. So I just wanted to play that voice note for persons to hear. So I know members of the government listen, all right? And since the goodly minister, basically accused me of exaggerating the situation, here we have little issues. No, these are long-standing issues that did not exist, or if they did exist, not to the extent that it did, that it has been for the last 5 months, prior to April 28th. And as I told them, I live in the constituency, I've lived here all my life, so I know. So you can't come to tell me, well, this is anything normal. It is not normal. We are not accustomed to the challenges that we are facing. And as I pointed out, there are two members of the government who live in my constituency, or who lived in my constituency, but I know they still have property in the constituency, and assuming that they still live here. But I spoke to one of them, and they indicated that they visit from time to time, but apparently having ascended to high office, they now felt the need to move on out. Like the Jeffersons who moved on up to the east side. Well, they moved on out of the east side to more appropriate accommodations that is more in line with their new station and perhaps their new financial circumstance. Right? So I can't fault them. People making a ton of money as ministers, and who knows how else they getting money too. So if they feel that where they lived before in the constituency is now beneath them, and they want to move on up to better accommodation, well, who am I to begrudge them that? But they know that what I'm saying was in fact correct. That the challenges that we're facing for water now is not what previously obtained. So I just wanted to play. So in case they're listening, well, I know they're listening. Listen to this, right? This is the teacher that I referenced.
A pleasant good night to Miss Joyce and the councillor. This is a resident from Parliamentary, and it is ridiculous with this water situation. Rain falling, right? Rain falling. And you tell me why I pay water every month, right? And these people not coming and turning on the water. And it's a control system because they know what they're doing. My 2 times empty, I couldn't go to work and teach government during the day. You know what I had to do? I had to stay home and go hunting looking for water. And now come from spending $500 buying water to flush my toilet and bathe and all these things. That is wrong. That is wrong. Or they can't be giving people water, and all they do give them the pressure low, it hardly put in the tank. People can't be suffering, so you understand? I pay my taxes, I pay everything. And then I pay for my place too, and every month I pay water. You understand? So how I had to reach that point now where I don't have no water to take a bath or to bathe my train on it. That's wrong. Or they need to do something about it. Posing up all over the place. You go down, I'm a clean, I set a pothole. I had to change suspension the other day. I had to change this, change that, because I set a big pothole right in front of you. These are things what they need to address. And stop trying to look pretty when they do something some way, and make sure the people needs are met. We suffering too long for water. Water is a necessity. Hold there and cook. I buy chicken and chips for them children. Thank God I have money to still buy that. You understand? Or they do something about it now. Or the next thing I might do is board the media or something, because this water thing ridiculous now in Parliamentary. You understand? 2 big tanks I have in the bag, and my tank's empty. First me ain't get no water long. It's a washerman I come there to tell him, check to see if my pipe rusty or something, because I said like my pipe plug up. That why me get no water. Only to realize it's a general concern in the blasted neighborhood. Or they need to do something about that, man.
Right. I don't know. That's Natasha Scott is asking how that sounded fast. So, well, I guess she must have been talking fast because she was so frustrated. And this is just one of several that have been sent to me, right? I would have also gotten, let me see, a WhatsApp message. See if I get this here. Right. So this was a WhatsApp message that was forwarded to me that was sent to the engineer, the WASA engineer for this area. Greetings. Firstly, thank you for releasing water in Malabar South. However, there are serious shortfalls. Persons are continuously registering their disgust. Whenever the water comes, the pressure is definitely not powerful enough to reach their tanks. Furthermore, the water is only coming for a few hours, and this has been occurring for too long. The truck-borne water is insufficient to supply the over 5,000 residents. The people are suffering extensively. There are children, sick persons, physically challenged, and the elderly. It is unacceptable, and this cannot be continued. This cannot continue unabated. My phone is on overdrive as I have to be in constant communication with my Burgesses. It's ridiculous. But Miss Minister Water, Barry, fix it now. All they came into power and we will fix it, I'll fix it. The problem didn't exist before you all came. Yeah, we were getting water 3 days a week, but it was sufficient for most of the constituency. So just go back to doing whatever existed before and be good. We wouldn't have a problem. And just make sure the water pressure is sufficient so people could get, instead of us having to go through that. But to add insult to injury, the minister put out a message. Just one, let me get it here. Right. In recognition of World Water Day, 22nd of March. And here's what he said. As we reflect on World Water Day, observed on March 22nd, let us be reminded of the vital role water plays in our daily lives and the shared responsibility that we all have in protecting this essential resource. This year's theme, Water and Gender, underscores the need for equitable access to water and sanitation and highlights the role of inclusive systems in supporting resilient and thriving communities. The government of Trinidad and Tobago remains committed to strengthening water infrastructure, improving service delivery, and advancing modern, reliable systems that meet the needs of all citizens. This includes investment in distribution networks, wastewater management, and sustainable source management practices. Rubbish. There's the comments that I wanted to read. So one person says it should be World Drought Day in Trinidad. Another one says once a week in Komoto. Another one says, please release the pressure at least once or twice a week so we'll be able to have the tanks filled. La Romaine, thanks much. Another one says, I guess Current Hills is out of the list. Back to the old-time days of filling bottles and buckets to have water to use. Filling barrels. This is ridiculous. Another person says, boss man, Toko have no water for the past 4 days. Another, and only getting water once for the week in Bagatelle Road and Diego Martin. Another one says, need water in Ramkalaya Branch Trace, wherever that is. Water problems in North Post Road, Diego Martin. This going on for years now. Another one says, we have no water in Diego Martin and still waiting for our WASA connection. Under his post. His post. But he knew all about all the issues facing the citizenry with water when he was in the opposition. Now that he has responsibility for that sector, he has nothing to say. Okay, not surprised. So, I think while I was away, there was the murder rate continues, as I saw someone reflected on in the comments. Continues to rise. I think we are on the cusp of 100 murders so far for the year. And as we know, the now government, when they were in opposition, love to say, well, crime goes up under the PNM. And when they talk about crime, it's usually murder, right? Because for some reason, crime and murder are used interchangeably in this country. So most times when people refer to crime, they're really talking about the murder rate. So we're about 92 or 93. It is difficult for me to give you an exact figure because if the official sources, you can't even get the correct figures from the police, the TTPS website. I don't know where else to go. You could check Ian Allen. There's another one by the name of DJ Sheriff. Sometimes his figures are off. So you're really, I mean, this is where we are. 2026, and we cannot find a reliable source to go to find out how many murders have been committed for the year. So we just have to average. But you know, when the PNM was in power, there was no shortage. The Daily Express and other newspapers had a running tally on the front every day. Right? So you could, if you weren't sure, let's pull the newspaper and check the top right-hand corner, and you would have been able to see the number of murders. So we knew when the PNM was in power, everybody had it correct. The numbers were in sync. So if you went on Ian Allen page and this one page and that page, you were seeing, you could tell. Now, difficult to tell what the exact figure is. That's where we are. And I wonder why. So we've been seeing on a frequent basis 2 and 3 murders and 4 murders in a day, or in the space of 24 hours, quite a few times within recently. We are now in the 12th month of this government. This government who told you we would have crime would be probably a thing of the past in 6 months. When they were sworn in on the 3rd of May last year, they said, in 6 months, don't worry, we have a crime plan. The UNC is here, we will fix it. That waste of time PNM that recorded the highest murder rate in the country's history ever, 624 murders. Don't worry, you're going to get that down. They boasted 42% reduction in the murder rate. And the only crime plan this government has been able to offer you in the last 11, now in the 12th month, are states of emergency. That's it. States of emergency. Nothing else. And people still waiting. We heard about Plan B. They offer you ZOSO, which is just pockets of SOE, which they touted that would have solved the murder situation, and all the sycophantic supporters, when it is that the ZOSO bill failed, they come out in their numbers, blame the PNM, blame the independent senators. Every time a murder happened after the 31st of January to the 1st of March, every time a murder takes place, where the ZOSO? We need the ZOSO, where the PNM? Where the opposition? Where the independent senators? This murder could have been avoided if we had ZOSO. Well, you don't have ZOSO, you have SOE, which is bigger than ZOSO. Where are the advocates for ZOSO? Where are you all? What is your excuse? And the hypocrisy when I read the comments, every time a murder or murders are posted on Facebook by one of these news outlets, and when you go in the comments and you do a comparison of what the comments used to be when the PNM was in power and what they are now. When the PNM was in power, I keep saying, Rowley must go, Hines must go, the PNM must go. This government lacks the political will to deal with crime. The government don't know what they're doing. And they were quick to post this meme from when Dr. Rowley was opposition leader, and he made some comments about if the government can't fix the crime or something, so they are part of it. And all. Ad nauseum all over. Yeah, man, they posting. With gay abandon. They knew the solution, everybody who must go and who must go. Now, almost 1 year into office, every time a murder takes place now, the same people who are, this one must go and that one must go. What they say now? Lord, put a hand. This is so sad. What our country coming to? No calls for anybody to go. Despite the fact that you would have given your vote to this administration on the basis that they told you they had the solution to crime. But now, when Ola Christopher said, we have to pray. Not just prayers alone, but we must include prayer. What did they do? They said the worst thing about Ola. She's the praying commissioner. But now all of a sudden, the UNC sycophants understand the power of prayer. Yes, we need to have a day of prayer. We need to call on the Lord. That's all they're saying in the comments. Rest in peace. This is so sad. How unfortunate. You all didn't know about that under the 10 years of the PNM. No, it's blame the PNM, blame the government. And then, of course, you have the outliers, those on the fringe, who somehow, almost a year later, could find some way to blame the previous PNM administration for the country's current crime situation. Always because of what the PNM did and the PNM and what the PNM. It's been almost a year. How long are you going to sing that song? For the next 4 years? So 2030 will come and we'll still be here. But it's because of what the PNM do and what the PNM do. It's been almost a year. Your government said they had the answer. They told you all the solution to home invasions was stand your ground. stand your ground legislation, and we will bring legislation to make it easier for law-abiding citizens to acquire firearms. We are in the 12th month. They have brought legislation for all manner of things. No legislation to make it easier for you, the law-abiding citizen, to acquire a firearm, as they promised. They told you, load up the matic, empty the clip, reload it. That would solve the problem. Just last week, we saw the top brass of the TTPS had a press conference, and they made mention, yes, we are seeing some reduction in the crime figures, in robberies and larceny and all of these things. But we notice there is an increase in home invasions. But we have some suspects in custody, and we are working towards dealing with that. Standing ground has been legislation since last year. It has been the law. They came and they passed that with due dispatch. That was supposed to stop home invasions. But I guess they didn't tell you how it was supposed to. So is it that when the perpetrators come, it's supposed to say, stop, in the name of standing ground legislation, it is now law. And that's supposed to frighten the perpetrators, right? So almost every day you're reading on the newspapers, home invasion, home invasion, home invasion. You see, that's when you sold legislation as a panacea, as a silver bullet. No pun intended. And you didn't explain to the people, because the population, or those who took it in and who were minded to give you support, because you couched it against the backdrop of load up the matic, pull it back, knock it on them and knock it again, empty the clip, reload and empty, people figured that this legislation would have entitled you to a firearm. But you weren't focusing on that part, and you see that was sold. So the legislation is in place, and now we are still seeing a significant number of home invasions taking place. What is to be noted is that while these home invasions are taking place, and again, so the UNC sold it to the population. Imagine 2 o'clock in the morning, you lie down in your bed and 3 armed men kick down your door and they come to rape your wife and your daughter. Imagine 10 o'clock in the night, you're looking at a movie with your family and 3 armed men come and kick down your door and they come to rape your wife and your daughter. Everything was imagine they come to rape your wife and your daughter. Imagine they come to rape your wife and your daughter. Well, so far, all of the home invasions that we have been seeing, no reports of anybody raping anybody's wife and anybody's daughters. They come, they put some licks on you, they ransack your house, they take your van, they take your money, whatever other valuables that they could take. Nobody's wife and daughter getting raped. But again, that is how they sold it, fear-mongering, and then accuse us on the opposition side of doing just that. So they're writing people, we need stand your ground, stand your ground. Anybody use stand your ground yet? Have we seen any case of anybody who was a victim of home invasion use the stand your ground? They kill the perpetrator and said, well, I was standing my ground? No. Where are all the calls for the legislation to make it easier for you all to get firearms? Isn't that what you all voted for? All of the UNC supporters, all the pro-UNC people who went out on April 28th and cast your ballot so that it would be easier so you could get a firearm. How come you all not calling on the government to bring that legislation? The same way they came quick to bring legislation to take away Stuart Young's pension. That was urgent. That was important. That was among the first pieces of legislation they came with. That was more important than protecting you, the average citizen. And they came with legislation to repeal the Revenue Authority. That was more important than bringing the legislation to promise made, promise kept, promise delivered, to make it easier for you to get a firearm to protect yourself, because apparently that's all you could use. I didn't see nobody using anything else. I didn't hear nobody using a cutlass or a baseball bat, 2x4, a piece of iron, a knife, nothing. So it seems without a weapon, a gun, you can't defend yourself. That's what your government are. No talk, but they ain't talking about that, right? The Prime Minister is not feeling any questions on that, and all the Minister of Homeland Security could tell you is, I love you all. Everybody, real love sharing in that government. But it's love that you can't really use, that is of no use, right? They show you they love you by taking away your job if you was working CPEP, URP, forestry. Look all the fires we see now, all these bushfires, all up in the mountains and up in the hills and so on, threatening people's homes. And only now, citizenry is being made aware of the important role that the forestry workers were playing with respect to protecting these homes in terms of how they were planting the trees, how they were cutting the bush, and so on to prevent, so that if there is a fire, that there is no feedstock to enable the fire to reach to threaten people's homes. Right? And even though we see in videos now with some of these guys who are working for us, even though they're no longer employed, they're not being remunerated, they're still going out there and assisting, still going out and doing the work that they were being paid for under the PNM, that critical work. Now, no compensation, but you know what? They are showing themselves to be patriots, and at the end of the day, you can't say, throw up your hands in the air and say, well, I don't care. Let the house burn down because the government took away my job, so let the government feel it. No, some of them still going out there and doing what they need to do. Where are the advocates for them? Those of you whose homes are saved and are being saved, how come you all aren't writing letters to the editor and to the newspaper? How come you're not calling the radio stations to speak of that issue and to tell the government, do something? There is need for these persons, because you know what? Your prime minister thought that all the forestry workers were doing was cutting grass. And she said it, CPEP cutting grass, URP cutting grass, forestry cutting grass, corporation workers cutting grass, everybody cutting grass. That's all they did, cut grass. There's no grass cutting now, so bushfires all over the place because the grass growing wild, right? So yeah, fire's having a field day. So we will see. Maybe when one or two of their friends' homes end up catching fire, God forbid, because of that, maybe you will see them do something, right? But these workers clearly were serving a purpose, and it wasn't just ghosts, as they want to claim. Apparently it was ghosts that was cutting the bush and maintaining. But anyway, yeah. But they couldn't care less. But kudos to these guys who are still going out there and doing the work, because they understand the significance of what they did and why they did what they did and how important that work is. And they don't want to see anybody's homes burn down. But all right. So I saw a murder take place, an unfortunate murder in which an 11-month-old baby and his father were killed. And try as I might to find a statement, something, anything, commiseration, anything, condolences from the Prime Minister, from the Minister of Homeland Security. Can't find it. But when you all may recall back in 2024, I believe it was in the constituency of Moruga, Tableland, a gentleman and his daughter, his 5-year-old daughter, were murdered. He was a shop owner, and it is alleged that, he refused to submit himself to extortion, persons who were offering protection. He had to pay otherwise, and he was just running his, I don't know, this is what was reported. He was just running his business, his little shop or whatever it is, and persons came, opened fire, killing him and his daughter, right? And attempting to shield his daughter from the hail of bullets. He died, she died. And the UNC then, in opposition, had a lot to say. They couldn't hush, right? Again, we are in a failed state. That's the terms they were using. Trinidad and Tobago is a failed state. When the government cannot protect its citizens, we are a failed state. Also coupled with the PNM crashed the economy. The government bankrupt. Economy crashed. That's what they were saying. So I went on the Prime Minister's Facebook page because she put in our statement for everything when we had our Private Members' Day motion again, speaking to the issue of armed police officers in school. And she put out, well, I guess it was a prepared speech, right? Because she accused us of all kind of things, trying to protect pedophiles and all kind of nonsense and the like. She put out a statement on that statement. She sent condolences to the people of Suriname on the passing of their former president, but no condolences to the family of this guy and his 11-month-old baby. This baby, who was the same age as this government's tenure, 11 months and counting, right? So the only Prime Minister who has ever had responsibility for the safety of this child is Kamala Persad-Bissessar. The only government that has ever had responsibility for the safety of this child is this current UNC administration. All right? Because 11 months, this government is 11 months. So that's the only Prime Minister that he knew. Well, he didn't know, but the only Prime Minister that has been around since he has been alive. So she failed him. You can't blame the PNM for that. Right? You failed, and your government failed this 11-month-old baby. Okay? But I will say this. When that murder happened, Dr. Rowley put out a statement. And I'm referring here in Newsday article dated Thursday, 22nd August 2024. PM shocked and angered by 5-year-old's killing. The Prime Minister in a Facebook post on August 21st has said he was shocked and angered at the barbarism that results in violent criminal conduct with total disregard for human life in Trinidad and Tobago. His comments came in response to the murder of 5-year-old Anika Guerra, who was shot dead alongside her father, Enrico Guerra, at their St. Mary's Village, Moruga home on August 20th. Dr. Rowley questioned how an adult with a firearm delivers several shots into the body of a 5-year-old child. He said, "This and acts like these represent the worst of what we are and what we have produced." The PM concluded his post by saying the government continues to provide alternatives and promote humane responses. He said the pursuit of those who threaten public safety will be relentless. Our national efforts must not waver, and the heartless perpetrators will be identified and justice will be served towards eliminating this scourge from our country. Anika was at her father's mini-mart, Enrico's corner shop, having her hair combed around 9:45 p.m. when 3 gunmen attacked her father, who was standing outside the shop. Enrico ran inside, but one of the assailants followed him and continued shooting. While Guerra's mother took cover, it was too late for Anika, who was hit multiple times in the face, arm, and lower back. Her mother was treated and discharged. Enrico died at the scene, and Anika was pronounced dead at the Princestown District Health Facility. I saw nothing similar coming from Mrs. Prasad Bisesa. And with respect to the Minister of Homeland Security, all I saw when the media attempted to ask him questions, pointed questions, specific to that killing just last week when he was going to the Senate to give a statement. He refused to stop and take questions. Instead, all he said to the media is, "I love you all." And that was it. And he went inside. I have nothing more to say. I love you all. That's the Minister of Homeland Security. When the PNM was in power, UNC supporters again, they know, well, Rowley and them ain't care about people. They ain't care about poor people. They ain't care about the average citizen because they have security detail. So them good. Right? They have security picking them up from the time they leave home to go wherever it is, 2 and 3 set up ban and all kind of things. So Rowley has security and Stuart Young has security and this one has security. So they don't care about the people. Well, Roger Alexander has security. In fact, you have more ministers in this administration with state-sponsored security details than in the previous administration. Because under the PNM, the only ministers who had a security detail was Dr. Rowley as Prime Minister, which he's entitled to, the Attorney General, the Minister of National Security then, and the Minister of Energy. Right? 4. Not just those. Under this administration, you have the Prime Minister, we have the Attorney General, we have the Minister of Homeland Security, we have the Minister of Defense with personal security detail, we have the Minister of Rural Development and Local Government, the Minister of Public Utilities, right? And I heard that the current Minister of Energy may also have some security from I think one of Paria or Heritage or one of them, the state-owned security company, right? Where are the UNC supporters who used to claim that the PNM don't care, and Rowley don't care, and this one don't care because they have security detail? More ministers under this administration have security details, so they care. How have they shown that care? How have they shown that care? From what I understand, some of these ministers, you have round-the-clock security. So it's not just when they reach home and they get inside and stuff. You have some security detail is posted outside their house round the clock once they are there to ensure that they are safe. But no statement from the Prime Minister, no offer of condolences. We can send condolences to Suriname, nothing wrong with that, you're the Prime Minister, okay. But what about home here? Your own citizens. But that's nothing new because when she was leader of the opposition and her mother and daughter died in her constituency in a house fire, I saw no condolences were sent. I don't think she attended the funeral. In fact, That is how she became aware that her constituency the fire station in her constituency was without a fire tender. And she has been the member of parliament for Siparia for many, many years. Many years. But didn't know that. Right? When she was leader of the opposition, she went funeral for so she went to Andrea Barrett funeral. She went to the funeral of the young boy, the schoolboy who killed himself allegedly because he was being bullied. Right? She went to his funeral and others. Always there, all the high-profile funerals that that were in where the death was in the public space, perhaps looking for political mileage. Any questions as to when that funeral was? Anything? Even if you're not inclined to go because you're prime minister, some sort of commiseration, something, anything, nothing, no comment. Because to comment, I suppose she figured would be an admission that her government has failed when it comes to fighting crime. And contrary to what they put out there, is only under the PNM. Only under the PNM, crime goes up. We've seen an increase in the number of kidnappings for ransom. Under the last few years under the PNM, you won't hear about that. But now, you keep hearing that. Kidnapping. Look at this lady, Tara Polaya, was kidnapped from her home and was on her way to Venezuela, right? Thank God, the Coast Guard did what they had to do and they were able to intercept, and she's back home with her family now, no doubt very traumatized, but still. And that's the problem. But they wouldn't speak about that, right? When you were in opposition, you felt the need to speak to the population every Monday night forum. You had meeting Wednesday night pavement report and then Sunday morning waste of time press conference. Always in the media's face. Couldn't get enough of you all. Now they're in government, account to the people. Account to the people, but not even at the post-cabinet press briefing. Show up, you're already there at the diplomatic center. Would it kill you to just take a few steps? You need exercise anyway. When you come out from the cabinet room, just go to the area, the media center, and say a few words to the population. When she first became prime minister, oh yes, you were happy to talk to the population. Now you're sending out 1 or 2 minions and to talk about what? Nothing of substance, nothing impactful for the population. You came back from your great trip to meet up north. Your lifelong dream has been realized to stand in the same room with the President of the United States, right? And you were invited by the great Donald Trump. You might have probably came back with a sprained wrist from that handshake, but you were happy. One thing you don't have on Dr. Rowley, and her supporters could see what they want. Every time Dr. Rowley went abroad and he came back, if he didn't have a press conference at the diplomatic lounge in the airport, immediately upon his return, rest assured the next day, he would call a press conference, perhaps at the office of the Prime Minister or the diplomatic center, and he would speak about his trip. This is what was discussed. This is what happened. So he would always account to the nation every single trip that he made. Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar came back. No such accounting. She came to the parliament to make a statement in the parliament, and when we thought she was going to account to the population, finally will tell us what came out of this trip, instead they come to talk about PNM and Balijé House and how much money spent, and Balijé House was funded by drug money, and talk about pedophile ring in the PNM and all of that. This is the Prime Minister wasting Parliament's time for that. When the people, you made a big thing about advertising this press conference, this statement that you were going to make. People tuned in only to hear you come and talk that rubbish. Precious little was told to the population about what benefits we received from this trip. Right? So it is 1 month. Today is what? The 5th? She went on this trip was on the 7th of March. So it's basically 1 month since this trip happened. What did we benefit? Her supporters were telling us we expected a basket of goodies. When she come back, she's coming back with this. No mention. So we are in April. So the OFAC license, the Kobo Sweat license that they got at the end of September has come, well, it's supposed to come to an end because it was 6 months, right? And that was around 30th of September, thereabout, so early October, right? So it should be coming to an end either this week coming here or next week. Nothing about what was supposed to be achieved and accomplished with that OFAC license has been achieved. None of the KPIs were achieved. No discussion has been had with Venezuela at least not from the governmental level. Nothing was had. So that Kobo Sweat 6 months license is about to expire and nothing has been accomplished. But they rate it up. Big press conference. John Jeremy come with the Manila folder. I could only show you the top. Just the header. Because I know the media, you all creative. You all will zoom in to see if you could get the exact wording and post it out there. So I ain't going to show you. I'll just open the folder and I'll read from it and then I'll close it back. And I'll just show you. You could get a little peep at the top. And the supporters went wild. Yes. They canceled Stuart Young thing and Rubio and Trump canceled the OFAC license and Rowley and him get. And look what Kamala was able to achieve and what Rowley couldn't achieve. And we get Dragon license and up. What did they achieve in the last 6 months? Where are the UNC trolls who normally come on the chat? Where are you? Tell us. Did they achieve any of the KPIs that were required under that 6 months Kobo Sweat OFAC license that you all were so happy about and crowing about? Yes, look, Kamala went and look what she achieved. She achieved nothing. Absolutely nothing. Wasted 6 months. And what has happened now? Trinidad and Tobago has found itself in the situation where we are now excluded, in a sense, because she is still persona non grata. And we see where the president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, who they maligned and said the worst of things about alongside her predecessor, Nicolas Maduro. Remember during COVID when Delcy came here, they had plenty to say. She come on a sanctioned aircraft. We want to know what she come on, what they talk about. And they come to talk about oil and Delcy and Wilma Ruperti and Astrobal Chavez and all of that. The bald-headed buffoon. And the Roberts used to always be talking about that. Wilma Ruperti and Astrobal Chavez and Delcy. Everything is Delcy. The same Delcy they're depending on today. Right? The same Delcy on whom the US has now lifted all sanctions. Right? So she is no longer persona non grata for the US. Mr. Trump has said, you know what? We'll let bygones be bygones. All the things that she stands accused of, some of the same things that we accused Nicolas Maduro of, her slate is wiped clean. She's absolved. Right? So the US is no longer interested in Delcy in terms of bringing her to justice as they brought Mr. Maduro. So in the same way that you could have absolved Delcy, why didn't absolve Maduro as well? Why not? But we know Mr. Maduro's ousting had precious little to do with what we were actually told, that drugs and all of that. And, we know that. But all this about Delcy, where is Delcy today? So, let me get this here. See what's the time nearby? That's not. Let me get this here. See if I get this. Where is it? Right. So give me 1 second, folks. There's so many things you see. See this here. Right. So get it here. Right. Delcy Rodriguez gains U.S. backing as Washington lifts sanctions against her in a dramatic Venezuela policy shift. In a major geopolitical development, the United States has lifted sanctions on Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, signaling a decisive shift in Washington's stance towards the South American nation and effectively endorsing her leadership. Not Maria Machado, who they said legitimately won the election, the same election that they said Maduro rigged, right? And that was one of the reasons that Mr. Maduro was attacked by UNC. You know that he's a dictator. Rigged elections. No democracy in Venezuela. Install Maria Machado because she is the duly elected. People, the majority of the people voted for her. The elections were a sham. Where is Miss Machado today? Reminds me of Juan Guaido. Remember when the UNC was supporting him too? And how that went? Where is Mr. Guaido today? Haven't heard that name in a while. But Miss Machado is according to them, the legitimately elected president. So are we subverting the will of the majority in Venezuela? What do you call that? Isn't that dictatorship? Because if the majority of the people want Machado, but a holdout from the last administration, that was the dictatorship administration. Delcy was second in command. Now the sanctions have been lifted and the US has basically endorsed her as the legitimate president. Where is Ms. Machado in all of this? Who gave Donald Trump her Nobel Peace Prize? All in an effort to gain his support. And he said, well, right now, I don't think she's strong enough. She's kind of weak and she doesn't have the support on the ground in Venezuela to be president. Even though the people elected her and the democratic thing to do would be to install her. Because that's what the majority of the people want. We go with Delcy. Delcy, who has been under US sanctions for years. The move confirmed by the US Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFAC, removes Rodriguez from its sanctions blacklist, granting her access to international financial systems, foreign assets, and global travel. So that means Delcy could jump on a plane and go anywhere in the world that she wants, and nobody is going to put her in handcuffs because the US is no longer interested in incarcerating her for any of the things that she has been accused of over many years. So while in Trinidad here, our political leadership, by what is it, big belly goat, I think is what it's called. Yeah. Oh yes, we fighting Delcy and we fighting Maduro because up north fighting them. Up north now say, well, yeah, well, we have a problem with Delcy, In fact, Delcy, come. Yeah. What the political leadership here has to say. What they had to say now? You all have been declared persona non grata and Delcy don't want nothing to do with all you. Opening the door to economic reset. This is the important part. In the aftermath, Rodriguez, previously vice president, was installed as interim leader, although Venezuela's high court still technically considers Maduro the sitting president under temporary absence. Washington has moved ahead with formally recognizing Rodriguez as the country's legitimate authority in diplomatic and legal matters. So it means that Delcy is going to be the president of Venezuela, at least for the next 5 years or so, to serve the rest of Mr. Maduro's term. The lifting of sanctions is expected to have immediate economic implications. It clears the way for Venezuela to re-enter global financial markets and strengthens its ability to attract foreign investment, particularly in its critical oil sector. Rodriguez has already taken steps to align with US expectations, including opening Venezuela's energy industry to international companies and advancing reforms aimed at increasing production and exports. Washington's policy shift also paves the way for renewed control over overseas assets, including US-based subsidiaries of state oil company PDVSA, such as Citgo. Relations, though, after years of tension, diplomatic ties between Washington and Caracas have rapidly improved in recent weeks. The United States has reopened its embassy in Venezuela for the first time in years, marking a significant step towards normalization after a prolonged period of hostility. Engagement between both governments has intensified, and with discussions centered on trade, energy cooperation, and rebuilding Venezuela's economy following years of sanctions and political instability, internal pressures and uncertainty remain. The removal of sanctions on Delcy Rodriguez marks one of the clearest signals yet of a new US strategy, shifting from isolation to direct engagement with Venezuela's current leadership. While the move opens doors for economic recovery and diplomatic normalization, it also underscores the fragile and evolving nature of Venezuela's political future, with much still depending on how both Washington and Caracas navigate the next phase of this complex transition. Right? When the PNM, Dr. Rowley and Stuart Young and the rest of us were telling this government, when they were in opposition, hey, pat down, relax on yourself. Shh. Sometimes silence is golden. Despite your issues with Maduro and you're trying to impress up north, relax. Understand that this relationship is very important. You don't need to take sides, but just adopt a neutral stance now. But no, because we're trying to impress up north. So if up north say Maduro is a dictator and he's a drug trafficker and he's a narco trafficker, we say, I say, yes, massa, we sick. Not you sick, we sick. You sick, we sick. So if massa say, we say. Today, massa good. But they say when door get in between man and woman, business, husband and wife thing. Don't get involved in that, because when you take side and then they make back up and they're good, you are the enemy. But apparently Mrs. Prasad Bissessa and UNC not familiar with that. So they decide to take sides. Now Delcy good, up north good, right? And we, our Prime Minister, Delcy say she's persona non grata. The Venezuelan Assembly says she's persona non grata. As far as the Supreme Court in Venezuela is concerned, she is persona non grata. And therefore she, representing Trinidad and Tobago, persona non grata. Because the Venezuelan authorities, when it comes to negotiating for oil and gas and so on, they're not talking to the average citizen on the street. You're talking to the heads of government and their representatives, none of whom have had any discussion with Venezuela in the last 6 months that they've had their precious Kobo Sweat OFAC license that has now shown itself to just be a piece of paper, right? There's an empty piece of paper that is about to expire and is just good for the shredder. Nothing else. It did nothing. It served no useful purpose and will serve no useful purpose. Washington, Prasad Bissessa went to St. Kitts and Nevis. She talked to Marco. You ain't got no extension on your Kobo Sweat license. You went to Doral. You talked to Donald for a few seconds. I'm sure you had opportunity to speak to, you talked to the U.S. Treasury Secretary, the Commerce Secretary, the Energy Secretary, all kind of pictures. But you see no pictures of you talking to Trump other than when you went up to take the picture and get your sprained wrist. All right, but you're going and talking. You're having one-on-one meeting up to now. We can't see a picture. We heard no report of this one-on-one meeting that took place on the fringe. Sometimes this government have you thinking we live in the twilight zone. They exist in a different reality from everybody else. So you talk to Treasury Secretary, Commerce Secretary, Energy Secretary in the United States, and you talk to the Secretary of State again. No extension of your 6-month OFAC Kobo Sweat license. Did you say to them, Alena? Well, you know, the OFAC license that we got the 6 months coming to an end very soon. So are we inclined to get an extension, negotiate something? Nothing. No mention of that. None. But we're hearing and reading that Shell, meantime, negotiating with Venezuelan authorities. Shell, not anybody representing Trinidad and Tobago, as was the case when the PNM was in power and Stuart Chung was chief cook and bottle washer as it came to negotiating for that Dragon license for Laura and Manatee. Bear in mind, what Stuart Chung was able to negotiate was a decoupling, delinking of Lauren and Manatee, since Manatee is on our side. And because of the challenges that the sanctions presented with respect to Lauren, which we were interested in, but because of the sanctions and the challenges that they posed, we said, well, here what? Allow us to develop our side, Manatee, and maybe sometime in the future, if sanctions are lifted, we can revisit Lauren. Because Venezuela doesn't have the money, they don't have the infrastructure to develop their vast gas fields. We don't have the money either. But what we have is the infrastructure, and we have connections with Shell and BP and the others to be able to monetize Venezuela's gas and enter into a production sharing agreement, which is what we had, which is what the OFAC license that Stuart Chung and Keith Rowley were able to secure was affording us. Production sharing, right? We were benefiting, we were sharing in the profits from that enterprise. That agreement no longer exists because the OFAC license that governed that agreement no longer exists. That was cancelled. And the new OFAC license that we got introduced a whole set of new players, all right? Primarily from the United States. So whereas before it was Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, Shell, more or less with respect to Dragon, so these were the three parties involved, the new 6-month Kobo Sweat OFAC license introduced US players who were not a part of the equation before. So now we have to share with more people. So the portion of the pie that Trinidad and Tobago would have gotten from the 6-month Kobo Sweat OFAC license was a lot smaller than what we were supposed to get under the 2-year, 3-year OFAC license that Stuart Chung and Keith Rowley were able to negotiate. Right? That no longer, that dead. I saw an article some time ago, a couple months ago, where some Venezuelan official was saying that there needed to be renegotiation of that whole arrangement, because under that arrangement, with Stuart Young and Keith Rowley were instrumental. You know, they love to talk about Rowley went and he do the conga line with Maduro. There were benefits to that conga line, far more than what we are potentially going to get from what currently exists. Potentially, because we have no idea. Whereas Stuart Young could have come and hold a press conference and tell you, well, this is what we discussed, this is what. Right. Within the parameters of what we could disclose. Monilal can't tell you that because he has not met Delcy. He has not spoken to anybody from Venezuela. So right now, Shell is their proxy. So they have no idea what Shell discussing when they go to Venezuela, and their officials go to Venezuela and sit down with whoever officials in Venezuela and what they're discussing. They have no idea, right? It seems that our government is just happy that there are some advanced discussions taking place, seeming negotiations. Shell has not yet taken an FDI, an FID, final investment decision yet. They took one under the OFAC license that Stuart Young and Rowley had got. Under this 6 months thing, no final investment decision has taken place yet, but we understand we are on the cusp of something. But we don't know what. So, and this is the point that Stuart Young has been raising for the longest while. And it is a very important point that he has been making. To me, not enough is being said about it. The media is not doing enough, and that's just my perspective. But let me see if I get this here. Just give me 1 second. I was hoping to get Stuarty on today, but he is otherwise disposed. So on another day, we will seek to have that discussion with him.
And our Minister of Energy, who she sidelines, Moonilal, are trying to claim all of the initiatives that are coming into play in 2027. When you look at what BP and Shell have announced coming into play in 2027, Manatee, Aphrodite, Mento, Cassia Sea completion and tiebacks, Ginger, all of that is the work of the People's National Movement. So I understand the desperation. I understand that they are incompetent. But come now, man. Go and do some work. Go and achieve something. You can't ride off of our coattails all the time. But I suspect that's what you may have to do. Because it is quite clear that you're deep in the blue sea and have no clue what to do. But don't worry, Trinidad and Tobago. The PNM will rescue you. And Trinidad and Tobago, as usual, more questions than answers. Today, surfacing on what appears to be an international report, is that an Italian firm has...
Is that Mumbai? No, it's not that one. All right, I was trying to find the video, right? So let me see if I get this here. I saw a statement put out. Well, Kevin Ramnarine was interviewed, and he said something that stood out for me. Let me see if I find this here. So let me get this here. I know most people will probably miss that, but this is an important development that cannot be allowed to. Let's get this. Where is it? So many things I see. Where is it? Where is it? Did I save it? Just now. Let me see if I find it. No, that's not it. All right, give me 1 second. Let me try something else. Right. Probably saved it. Did I save it on this way? Bear with me, folks. There's just so many things that I said in our running. Time is against me. Where is this thing? Not there. Try one more, please. Did I save it under this? All right, just now. Where is it? Saved. No, I didn't see it there either. All right, just now. Let me try one more place and see. You just need to start writing down these things. So, let me see, boy. Where is it? I wanted to quote from it. But anyway, so what I wanted to point out, Kevin Ramnarayan, having been interviewed, I wonder, was it on Ian Allen's page? So, let me see. I think it may have been there. Just I wonder if Eric had that by. It's an article that I'm looking for, Eric, where, let's see. Okay, this Crime Watch. Was it there or was it him? Nope. All right, so let me see when I find it. So Kevin Ramnarayan was making the point that under what currently taking place with Shell being the sole negotiator, there's no involvement of Trinidad and Tobago's government, right, to look after our interests. And essentially what he was saying is that we would just simply now be an importer of natural gas once there's an agreement reached between Shell and Venezuela. And Shell having significant shareholdings in Atlantic LNG and in the remaining 3 trains, that they could basically bring the gas from Venezuelan waters to the plant, do what they had to do, and basically we would probably get some taxes, from it. But the agreement there's no agreement in place yet. So as I said, we have no idea what are the terms and warranties that Shell is negotiating for Dragon. So while the UNC crooning, oh yes, every time an article pops up about Shell in talks and all of that, we don't know what's taking place, and it seems that the government doesn't know either. Let me see if I get this one here. Okay, let's see. Yes, no. And get this. Right. Padarat, government meeting with Shell. The government is engaged in discussions with British energy giant Shell. Minister in the office of the Prime Minister, Barry Padarat, said yesterday. Not Rudal Munilal, Barry Padarat. Speaking at the post-cabinet news conference at the Diplomatic Center, St. Anne's, he said, as we speak, members of the government are in meeting with Shell, not with the Venezuelan authorities, not with Delcy, not PDVSA, not anybody in Venezuela, with Shell. And this is an ongoing discussion that we have been having, and this is not an isolated development. When the Prime Minister traveled to the US and met with President Donald Trump, President Trump opened that door for TNT. Really? When did she have those discussions? In the 30 seconds or 40 seconds that she was standing next to him to take the photo? Because we know there was no other meeting. Minister Morris and myself were there together with Minister Stovers in terms of the deliberations with the Secretary with responsibility for energy, and a lot of those discussions are bearing fruit. A number of companies that are involved in the energy sector have been having active discussions with those who are responsible for the energy sector, including the Energy Minister. But yesterday, the Energy Minister was not on that trip when you all were having discussions with the US Energy Secretary. None of you, not you, not Sobers, not Morris, none of you all have the information that the Minister of Energy is supposed to have. That's why Stuart and Dr. Rowley used to go. And the UNC had a problem with the 2 of them going, right? The two big, the Hefes. On Wednesday, London-based Shell confirmed it was in advanced talks with the Venezuelan government for the development of 4 large areas containing natural gas near Trinidad and Tobago. 4. In a WhatsApp response to the Express yesterday, Munilal said Shell remains a strong and collaborative legacy partner to the government. Shell, along with other companies, was granted an OFAC license earlier this year, which allows it to engage in oil and gas activities in Venezuela. Earlier this month, Shell also finalized a series of onshore and offshore agreements with Venezuelan government and PDVSA. Shell, not the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Shell and other companies continue to look for exploration and production opportunities in full compliance with existing regulatory requirements. Shell remains a strong and collaborative legacy partner. Now, it is interesting. In a release that I saw, and same, I don't know why I can't find this thing. Just now. Let me see. Give me one more second there. Let me try one more thing there, folks. Hopefully this works. See if I get this here. Yes. Is this it? Right. So, another 20 to 30 years of life. International news agency Reuters reported yesterday that Shell could make a final investment decision by the end of the year on the 4.2 trillion cubic feet Dragon gas field in Venezuelan waters. Shell is targeting access to the three fields that, here it is. Shell is targeting access to the three fields that, along with Dragon, are part of the 12 TCF Mariscal Sucre project off Venezuela's eastern coast. This is in addition to the 7.3 trillion cubic feet Loran offshore area, part of a cross-border field that extends into Trinidad for some 20 trillion cubic feet of combined reserves, sources told Reuters. In an email response to the Express yesterday, corporate communications advisor at Shell, Port of Spain, Kelly Marie Patel, said, yes, we can confirm proximity to Manatee makes Loran an attractive investment opportunity for Shell. Shell expects to send the Venezuelan gas to Trinidad for processing into LNG for export, a big push for its shared Atlantic LNG project, which has been unable to reach installed capacity due to insufficient gas supply. In a development that could inject new life into TNT's struggling energy sector, and particularly the energy industry, two energy experts argued yesterday. Reuters sources said Shell now wants to include neighboring areas, expanding its reach in the OPEC nation under the government of acting President Delcy Rodriguez. The plan is to drill subsea wells on the Loran side and tie back to our Manatee platform in Trinidad once we get the rest of the field. Now, bear in mind, Trinidad and Tobago and the government of Venezuela never had any agreement with respect to Loran because of the sanctions. Hence the delinking and the decoupling. They agreed to allow us to develop Manatee. And as I said before, if sanctions are lifted as they have now been, but back then, we weren't seeing that up north, those sanctions being lifted. If, then we could go back and discuss Loran. But for now, we're dealing with Manatee. It seems that Shell is going ahead and doing their own thing. So they could say, well, here we are. Yes, you all had an arrangement with Dragon, which arrangement no longer exists. So really, Shell is in the driver's seat now. Under the last administration, the government was in the driver's seat because the government of Venezuela was negotiating with the government of Trinidad and Tobago, again, because of the very good relationship that Stuart Young had and the very good relationship that Dr. Rowley had with the then administration, which is now absent Mr. Maduro. So now that all of that, we got a 20-year license and a 30-year license, all of which the current administration under Delcy, previously under Maduro, say, well, right, we done that. All existing contracts with Trinidad and Tobago is now null and void and have no effect. Don't forget that was said. The Venezuelan National Assembly took such a decision on the recommendation of the same Delcy, who is now president, who was then Minister of Energy and probably still is Minister of Energy in Venezuela. So she calling the shots even more now. So when this government was being told, pat down, relax all yourself. No, Maduro is a narco trafficker and he's part of a corrupt cook-up with Rowley and Jindal, and they want to sell Jindal the refinery so that they could refine Venezuelan oil and sell Venezuelan oil here and all of that, and calling for sanctions on Dr. Rowley and Stuart Young. And so they painted the entire Maduro administration with the same brush. But I read for you all before, when Mrs. Prasad Bisesa won the election in April last year, the then Maduro government, notwithstanding all the nasty things that she and her government said, her party said about Mr. Maduro and his government, they still sent a very beautifully worded letter of congratulations to Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, right? Praising her on her victory, despite the claims that they were PNM party group, and expressing a desire to continue to work with the government, the new government of Trinidad and Tobago, in advancing, diplomatic relations, advancing relations as it pertains to the energy sector, national security, and all of these different things. Very beautifully worded letter. You would never think that they had any issue with Mrs. Prasad Bisesa, despite all the dirty, nasty things she said while she was leader of the opposition, and in the immediate wake of the general election. So the government of Venezuela was willing to put all that behind them. Let bygones be bygones, a fresh start. We understand when you're in opposition, you see things, and when you come into government, you have a different perspective. Apparently, the UNC and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa didn't get a memo. So they continued with the haranguing and the nastiness, right? And then in the wake of all of the bombings that were taking place, all the boats, the so-called drug boats that were being blown up, and they decided to double down and triple down. And with the back and forth between Prasad Bisesa and Venezuela authorities and our Minister of Homeland Security and the Minister of National Security in Venezuela, who described Mrs. Prasad Bisesa as a drunk, and our Minister of Homeland Security referred to that gentleman as a, what is boy, if he's a pimp and all kind of choppy talking rubbish. That's not how you engage diplomatically. And we saw with all the tit for tat and back and forth and so on, and seeming support for up north, Venezuela say, well, here, what, as far as we see, all here, encouraging the thing. You all are complicit. And we will hold you all responsible. If anything happens in Venezuela, if the US attacks Venezuela, we hold you responsible. Prasad Bisesa and government of Trinidad and Tobago. That's what they said. And as I said before, don't get involved in man and woman thing. And Dr. Rowley and Stuart was telling them, even then, we're in opposition. Pat down now, gosh. Relax yourself. Understand the importance. Don't engage in the tit for tat. 1 minute you're saying, nothing good with us and Venezuela, and then the next minute you're throwing talk and kill them violently and all of that. Advocating, kill them violently. We know who said that. So they'll see and they say, well, fine, since that's all you want to operate, we wash our hands of you. You want nothing to do with it. Mr. Trump has now opened the door, say we will lift in sanctions, and we send in, we want to develop the oil and gas in Venezuela, more so the oil, but the gas too. So we decide we're going to lift sanctions. Companies that want to go to Venezuela and do things in Venezuela and develop the energy sector, you're welcome to go. What has now happened? You all heard me mention just now Mariscal Sucre. It's not the first time you've heard me mention that. And I think probably I'm one of the few people who you all have heard you mention that particular field where the dragon gas is. And I told you all there's so much more gas in there. But under the last administration, Venezuela and Trinidad and Tobago, because of the US sanctions and so on, try as they might, BP and Shell admitted a couple years ago that what they were able to achieve in terms of negotiating with Venezuela and Venezuelan authorities to develop their part of their energy sector, they would not have been able to do it without Stuart Young and Keith Rowley, and without the diplomatic relations between the two countries, because they have been trying. I remember reading an article where BP said that for years they have been trying, they've been knocking on the door to try and get in there to be able to get a little piece of the natural gas pie in Venezuela, to no avail. They had discussions, but it went nowhere. but it is only enter Stuart Young and Keith Rowley and the development of diplomatic relations between those two administrations that BP and Shell were able to make headway where they could not have done on their own. Now the dynamics have changed. The landscape has changed. All right? Where, as before, Venezuela needed Trinidad and Tobago to some extent because we had reached, under the Biden administration, we had reached that Venezuela did not have. And see, they saw us as offering somewhat of a lifeline because Stuart was going to Washington and he was negotiating with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and we were able to get concessions, the 2-year OFAC license, and then we got a further extension on that license, not the Kobo Sweat that is about to expire. We got that. And Venezuela realized, well, hey, Trinidad and Tobago making a little pathway for us. We can make a little money because without that sanctions, we really can't do anything. And I was telling you all, I said, yes, we're looking at Dragon. Yes, we're looking at Loran. We're looking at Manatee. But that entire field, Venezuela has some 200 trillion cubic feet of natural gas that just sitting there and that they are unable to do anything with it because they don't have the money, they don't have the infrastructure, and the amount of gas that they flare in on a daily basis is more than what Trinidad and Tobago is producing from our own fields. So they're literally sending up billions and billions of dollars every day in literal smoke, and we could use that. So I said that while the focus now was on Dragon and Loran Manatee, there's a lot more that is available. And once the opportunity presents itself, because Trinidad and Tobago was right up there, and we had such good relations with the Venezuelan administration, that we would be at the top of the line. So the minute the opportunity presents itself for access to more of that 200 trillion cubic feet of gas, 200 trillion cubic feet, the minute that you have the opportunity as it exists now, who would be right at the front of the line? Trinidad and Tobago. So we could end up getting more than Dragon, more than Loran, more than. Now, what is happening? Strained relations. Our government has no relationship with the government of Venezuela. Our prime minister has been declared and is still persona non grata. And who knows for how long she will be. Mr. Trump has now opened the playing field. So companies that previously could not have gone into Venezuela to get a piece of the pie, now that the door has been opened, they are going in there. Shell doesn't really need us because Mr. Trump has opened a pathway for them to go directly to the government of Venezuela and negotiate for more than Dragon. So they may say, well, all right, because we have interest and because of the long-standing relationship with Trinidad and Tobago, we willing to maintain, Dragon, Manatee, all right. Well, Manatee is all your own. We know you all were depending on Dragon before. But you see everything else? All the others we're going after? You all never had any thing in place with respect to Loran? So we're going after Loran. And you see that other 200 trillion cubic feet that there was never any discussion about? We're going after that too. But we're doing that on our own. And until it's all there. Yes, we will probably use our assets in the Atlantic LNG plant to process. But if Venezuela is inclined to give Shell significant access to that area, so much so that the Atlantic LNG plant might not be sufficient to process all that gas. What they simply do, bring in the equipment and do things that, and we get nothing from them. Nothing from that. Right? So right now we are at the mercy of Shell. Because Shell can now look how the tables have turned. Under Keith Rowley and Stuart Young, our government could do what Shell couldn't do. Now the tables have turned, and Shell can now do what our government can't do because they like to yap. They wanted to side with up north. They bad talk Delcy to the point where there's no relationship. So we have to be meeting, our government now has to be meeting in boardrooms with Shell to discuss what's going on. So what we could do, how things looking. They don't have any first-hand experience. So Shell now doing what Stuart Young was doing. When Stuart was running, as Dr. Rowley said, doing shuttle work between Port of Spain, Washington, and Caracas, and he was the main man, El Capo de Tutti Capi. Now Shell is El Capo de Tutti Capi. So we just had to take whatever Shell give us. And if it is we decide we want to play hardball and say, well, whatever arrangements all they had in place before we did, Shell could say, well, here, wanna. The LC say, all is to get nothing. She want nothing to do with all here. So it's either we deal with them directly, right? And we cut all out. So humble yourself. At best, we will bring the gas to the Atlantic LNG plant, we'll process it here, and whatever royalty or whatever thing we had to pay all here because of your shareholding, right? The new shareholding that the government has because Stuart Young and Keith Rowley renegotiated the arrangements. So now you all have shareholdings in trains that you didn't have before. Whatever that entitles you to, you will get. And probably any other taxes and stuff that we generate. But understand, they're between us and Venezuela, not all here. They also don't want to do nothing to do with all here. Okay? Maybe if PNM was still in power, would have been a difference. And Shell is going to move at pace to ensure that they get as much as they can get. Because they know there are others waiting in the wings to come in. And who have sights on what Shell has had sights on for years and what Shell probably was hoping Trinidad and Tobago could have gotten for them. Now, they don't need us. That is why we are nowhere in the boardroom. Our Minister of Energy is not in the boardroom when Shell is sitting in the boardroom with the officials from PDVSA and the government of Venezuela. So we get in third-party information, Shell negotiating, and then they come and they say, well, this is what we think, whatever. So the Kobo Sweat is about to expire. So once that expires in a couple of days or so, we have no OFAC license. We have nothing. Nada. Shell is now free to go and apply for their own OFAC license, I suppose, to deal with Dragon and to deal with whoever else. Where does that leave us? So certainly, under this administration, if Dragon comes to fruition, and we have no reason to doubt that it will, what we were going to get under the Keith Rowley Stuart Young arrangement is definitely not what we're going to get now. And Stuart has been asking, tell us what's going on. What is the arrangement? Well, non-disclosure, we can't discuss that. As former Minister of Energy, we can't disclose this and we can't disclose that. What can you disclose? Because while you're all saying you can't disclose, you're not saying anything. But Shell talking to Reuters, and Reuters is reporting to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago what the government of Trinidad and Tobago should be reporting to the citizens, and they are not. Under the cloak of, well, we can't discuss, and confidentiality. Well, it seems Shell don't have respect for all the confidentiality because they're talking, and we're getting more from Reuters than we're getting from our own government with respect to this arrangement that we have been depending on for many years. Ah, boy, I tell you. But we will be having a press conference later on this week, and you will hear more from Stuart. He will speak to that issue. All right, but let me just read this here, the part that I wanted to read. So I'm quoting Kevin Ramnarine. Former Energy Minister Kevin Ramnarine said yesterday, TNT's energy sector could gain another 20 to 30 years of life if ongoing talks between Shell and Venezuela materialize. Ongoing talks between Shell and Venezuela, not between Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela. It's very important. At the center of the potential deal is access to Venezuelan gas reserves, which Ramnarine said could help revive the country's struggling LNG and petrochemical sectors. You see, when you're talking in terms of could and should and may and possibly and not certainty, conjecture and not certainty, there is cause for concern. Because it tells you that the government of Trinidad and Tobago clearly, as Stuart said, deep blue sea without a raft. If, and we keep hearing, if Shell is able to marry Venezuelan reserves and to produce those reserves to our LNG industry in Point 14 and our Point Lisas plants and so on, that's good for Trinidad and Tobago. That allows our energy sector to have another 20 to 30 years of life, he said in a telephone interview. He described the development as a critical moment for the industry. You remember when now look at the amount of gas that is possible at Shell going after. They can't fault Shell for their ambition because if they could tap into that 200 trillion cubic feet of Mariscal, Sucre, and others, and they could get the lion's share of that, I highly doubt that our Atlantic LNG plant may be able to handle all of that. Which is why the previous administration wanted to mothball Train 1. Right? This is why they had spent money to mothball Train 1. So just in case the gas became available, that we would have Train 1 available to do that. But I said, the UNC said, oh, waste some money. And this one tell later I'm making sense because it had no gas. And that one say, and Shell say, and the Chinese say, and this one say, it's making sense. And that was a waste of how much money. At the time, that was the only train in which we had shareholding. Right? And the government wanted to saw the sense in it. But now, nobody foresaw what is happening now as going to happen, where the US would have lifted sanctions so soon on Venezuela and open up opportunities that didn't exist before. Gas possibilities that did not exist before. Shell has now set their sights, as I read just now, on fields that we have not even heard of. This is the chance, this is the opportunity, and they're looking to capitalize on it. Because in just over 2 years' time, Mr. Trump will no longer be president of the United States, and they don't know what a new administration will bring and what their posture would be towards Venezuela. So, hey, if this one is created, hey, let's get on this now as quickly as possible. Let us negotiate. And I am sure when Shell sit down in the boardroom with the people, PDVSA and the government of Venezuela, they're not just talking Dragon, they're not just talking Loran, they're not just talking Manatee. Okay? They did their research and they see what is possible, and they want to get a jump on all of their other competitors who might be now organizing themselves, who do not have assets, infrastructure assets in the region to be able to develop that gas. And therefore, while they're still doing their assessments, Shell is way ahead. And Shell saying, well, while they're waiting to catch up, let me do what we need to do. No. So that by the time they catch up and they're ready to approach the Venezuelan administration to negotiate, we done lock down here, we lock down there, we lock down there, we lock down there. So is whatever is left, they will have to negotiate for. But we good. Train 1 looking pretty good right about now. More money. Trinidad and Tobago had a shareholding stake in that. But we decommissioned that because we say we have no gas. So what's the point? What's the point? Well, we're seeing the point now and the wisdom of the last administration in mothballing. But just say, according to Ram Narayan, the move reflects a long-term strategy by Shell, which has steadily expanded its influence in TNT's LNG sector over the past decade. Shell has been playing a long-game strategy with Trinidad and Venezuela as it relates to natural gas and LNG, he said, explaining that this strategy began with key acquisitions. He goes on to say those two acquisitions between 2013 and 2015 gave Shell the largest shareholder footprint in Atlantic LNG. And it said to me, and I think it said to the industry, that they saw our LNG industry as strategic to their global LNG portfolio. So he's admitting they would have given Shell the lion's share of the Atlantic LNG plant. However, declining domestic gas production has since undermined the sector's performance. Those 4 trains in Atlantic LNG in 2014 were running under capacity to the extent that one of them, Train 1, had to be completely shut down. So now we have 3 operating trains operating at about 60%, 60 to 65% capacity. So right now they're operating at 60 to 65% capacity with the gas that we have. All right? And the amount of gas that Shell is targeting, so if we're at 60 to 65% with what we have now, and this does not include Dragon, it does not include Loran, it does not include Manatee, and any others. Imagine if Shell gets through with Loran, if Shell gets through with the rest of the Mariscal Sucre field, which is a portion of the 200 trillion cubic feet. Again, as I said, more gas than you had ever imagined. But we have 3 trains now. As he just said, we got rid of one because we didn't have sufficient gas. Now we are facing the prospect of too much gas, more than you need. More than. So if Shell decides, well, here what? Things looking good. We were able to negotiate with Venezuela and we get enough gas to last us for decades. So we setting down our bucket here. Right. 2 things can happen. They could either invest the money and see if they could, well, I don't know if it's possible for them to reactivate Train 1, or they could bring in their own equipment from outside, these big ships or whatever it is that they could bring in, and they could just negotiate and say, well, right, since we're not using Atlantic, because Atlantic doesn't have the capacity to process this, anything that we get outside of that. Now, of course, if Shell is ambitious as I believe they are, and they do what they need to do over the course of the next 4 years, it means that if perchance the PNM were to come back into office in 2030, there may not be much for us to negotiate to get. Right? There might not be much left of that 200 trillion cubic feet for us to go and negotiate to say, well, we are, So we are clearly no longer in the driver's seat. Shell is. In this shortfall, Ramnarayan said that has driven the push towards Venezuelan gas, particularly the Dragon field and surrounding reserves, which Kamala said we don't need. We look into Grenada, Suriname, Guyana. We don't need Venezuela gas. And then they come back and say, well, we need it. We don't need it. Just like up north saying, no, we don't need Iran oil, and then we don't need. Dragon is central to that. Shell may be in conversation with Venezuela for natural gas reserves beyond Dragon in the Mariscal Sucre area. Let me repeat that. Shell may be in conversation with Venezuela for natural gas reserves beyond Dragon in the Mariscal Sucre area, which our government should have been able to get if you all had made the right decision. If you all had made the right decision. So what may have been available to us before, Shell could now get it. Ramnarayan saying that. He's the energy expert, not me. He goes on to say, but while he welcomed the development, Ramnarayan cautioned that it marks a significant shift for the country. So this is positive news for Trinidad and Tobago. It would, however, constitute an importation of natural gas. I think that is something which a lot of people don't fully comprehend. He went further, noting the economic benefits of production would not remain entirely local. Let me repeat that. He went further, noting that the economic benefits of production would not remain entirely local. Ultimately, TNT has become an importer of natural gas to supplement our declining domestic production. The taxes and royalties associated, here it is, the taxes and royalties associated with the production of natural gas will be taxes and royalties to be paid to the Venezuelan government, Ramnarayan said, not the government of Trinidad and Tobago. The taxes and royalties associated with the production of natural gas will be taxes and royalties to be paid to the Venezuelan government. Under what previously existed, the OFAC license that the UNC supporters like to lash and all thing and negotiate with the dictator and so on, those negotiations, those OFAC licenses would have, and the contract, the 20 and 30-year license that we got, we would have shared in those taxes and royalties. We would have shared in that because it was supposed to be a production sharing arrangement and so profit sharing arrangement. Now Kevin is telling you those taxes and royalties would be paid to the Venezuelan government. No mention of Trinidad and Tobago's government getting any share in that whatsoever. Still, he stressed that a new gas supply was urgently needed with several downstream plants already affected. So what's going to happen? The gas comes to Trinidad. Shell has more to sell to NGC. NGC will then sell to the downstreamers. And the downstreamers now could then ramp up production of ammonia and urea and all these different things and stuff. And if they sell more, They produce more, they sell more, is more taxes for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. A far cry from what we stood to benefit when the PNM was in power. And why? Because your good government today thought it best to attack, to be nasty to Venezuela. Because they tell themselves, up north, going on the dispose, they're going to get rid of Maduro and get rid of Delcy and get rid of all of them and put Machado and her new government, right? So we could tell Delcy what we want, we could call she what we want. All the rest of them, we can say the worst of things about them because up north is coming to get rid of. See what taking place there? When you get rid of Maduro, that whole administration going. And we want Ms. Machado to know when she becomes president, that Trinidad and Tobago supports her and her regime, and we will now sit down and negotiate with her in the way that Rowley and Stuart Young was negotiating with the narco trafficker. Nowhere did they anticipate that they would just take Maduro and leave Delcy and everybody else, lift sanctions on Delcy, and recognize Delcy as the president of Venezuela, with no intentions whatsoever. No efforts are underway by the US to fix Venezuela, to hold fresh elections anytime soon. No talk about that. They seem to be very happy with the current arrangement, and it seems, all intents and purposes, Delcy is going to serve out the rest of Maduro's term, which is at least another 4.5, 5 years. All right? So our government, in its wisdom, didn't think it made sense to pat down. And no. They gambled, and they gambled wrong. They thought everybody was going to go, and they didn't think it was just one was going to go. Even when it seemed as if Maduro was willing to, let bygones be bygones himself, Delcy was pushing, no, persona non grata, cancel all contracts. We don't want nothing to do with Trinidad and Tobago. Today, she is in the driver's seat. She's the boss. She is El Capo. And our Prime Minister can even pick up the phone and call Delcy. You know who could do that? Stuart could. You know who could do that? Keith Rowley could. Even now, they could do that. But they do not have the mandate to do that. Right? Because you, the bright population, the electorate, felt the UNC was the better choice. So you put them in charge. They have the mandate. Stuart is just MP, opposition MP, member of parliament for Port of Spain, North St. Anne's West. He holds no portfolio in government. He has no authority by the Constitution or the powers of state to pick up the phone and talk to Delcy, send Delcy a pen pal letter, a WhatsApp, a email, nothing. He can do no such things. Well, he could he could, but he can't. Right? From a personal perspective, he could, because they have that relationship. Keith Rowley could still do that. I remember Stuart telling us, well, not us, but telling the country, that he was on a first name basis with the head of Woodside and the head of Shell and the head of International BP, and they would call him first name. Hey, Stuart, you're coming to this energy conference in Qatar, you're coming to this energy conference in Saudi, you're coming, they calling him to find out, anybody call him Munila? Do they even know him? Because his prime minister not carrying him anyway, for whatever reason. She ain't carrying he nowhere. She not carrying Keza anywhere, but you're carrying a set of people who not involved in the energy ministry. You're taking them with you to discuss energy. She is chief cook and bottle washer. What Pararat know about talking energy? What does Sobas know about energy? What does Nicholas Morris know about energy? They know what's going on in the energy ministry? Who best to go? Not the minister? So how come you went Washington to talk with Marco about energy? You ain't carry Munila. You went St. Kitts to talk, but you carry Farley, but then carry Munila. Ah, boy. Let me continue, because I'm looking at the time there. Where did I reach? Yes. Still, he stressed, right, we have a need for natural gas in Trinidad because, as you would, of course, note, a lot of plants in Point Lisas are down. As I mentioned, one LNG train went down. Ramnarine also pointed to global developments that could reshape the LNG market and create an opening for TNT. One of the facilities in the Middle East, which was attacked and partially destroyed, was the RAF or the Ras Laffan LNG Industrial Center city in Qatar, which produces 20% of the world's LNG. He believes these shifts could prompt a broader rethink of the country's energy strategy, and what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in Venezuela should allow us to take a strategic look at our natural gas sector and position for survival for the next 20 to 30 years. Another energy expert who spoke on the condition of anonymity yesterday said, the Shell move was a welcome development and one the company had been pursuing for some time. Shell's first obligation as to its shareholders, of which Trinidad and Tobago is not one. Right? Shell previously saw Trinidad and Tobago as a strategic partner. We had reach where they didn't. Now they have that reach, given the change in the dynamic. So they don't really need us. But because they have interests in Trinidad and Tobago, they might throw us a bone. So they may be willing to maintain, to some extent, similar arrangements that may have previously existed. But even if Shell is inclined to do so, Shell is negotiating for Venezuelan gas. And if Venezuela says, this is what is what is what, then this is what is what is what. Okay? So we will give you the license. So the license that we gave the government of Trinidad and Tobago, we'll squash that. We'll give you Shell the license to go and develop. We'll give you this field, that field, that field. Yes, we know. We have no discussions with government of Trinidad and Tobago about that. So that's between you and us. We have no interest. We're not dealing with them anymore. We're dealing with all here. We will give you all preference. You all will do it. If all they want to send it, whatever arrangements you all make, but you see what previously existed, the profit sharing arrangements between Trinidad and Tobago's government and Venezuela is off the table. You will develop. We will work out the terms and warranties of that arrangement, what you will give us. And what you do with it after that is your business. If you choose to sell some to Trinidad and Tobago, choose to process it at Atlantic LNG and sell it abroad, that's up to you. If you choose to sell some to NGC and NGC will in turn sell it to the downstreamers, that's up to you. But what previously existed, the contracts, the arrangement that the Venezuelan guy, and I'll probably talk about it next week, I'll get the article, where he was saying that was most advantageous to Trinidad and Tobago, more so than it was to Venezuela, no longer exists. So whatever we were to benefit, to the extent that we were going to benefit, under Stuart and Keith Rowley, and those two licenses, 20-year, 30, and that OFAC license, it is clear. We will not be benefiting to that extent anymore, and Kevin Ramnarine just confirmed it. Let me read that part again. Ultimately, TNT has become an importer of natural gas to supplement our declining domestic production. The taxes and royalties associated with the production of natural gas will be taxes and royalties to be paid to the Venezuelan government, Ramnarine said. Venezuela, not us. But when UNC wins, yellow is the code. Let me touch on one more thing here before I depart. So many things to touch on. Well, there were two things actually. So I saw where the Shogunas Borough Corporation has demolished the vending stalls of several vendors in Shogunas. And the mayor is saying that order will prevail. Let them go upstairs. People are saying, I know for traffic upstairs, so what's really going on? Right? The caring, loving government. If they could do that to their own constituents. I'm sure most of these vendors probably live in Shogunas. Many of them probably voted for the UNC. But all the love, half of me belongs to you and the other half I give to you. There have been prime ministers before me, prime ministers after me, but there will never be a prime minister who loves you as much as I love you. You're damn right. Because if that is how you show love, ain't no other prime minister going and do that, madam. Let's see if I get this here. just
ongoing demolition and clearing of the
Just
area,
a-
commonly referred to as the vendors' mall. The matter was previously before the High Court by vendors, when efforts were being made to relocate operations. The court ultimately ruled in favor of Shavana's Borough Corporation, affirming its authority and responsibility for the management of the area, while also establishing that reasonable accommodation must be provided to affected vendors. The corporation acted in accordance with this ruling, with alternative arrangement identified within the Shavana's market. Over time, the area in question deteriorated significantly. It became an unregulated space, lacking basic infrastructure such as electricity and running water, and evolved into a serious public health concern and public nuisance. Additionally, there were increasing instances of individuals informally occupying and subletting spaces, creating further disorder in a location that must be properly governed. This situation cannot be allowed to persist in the heart of downtown Chaguanas. The corporation also recognizes the critical need for a modern, well-organized transport hub to better serve commuters, vendors, and the wider public. The redevelopment of this area.
I thought Alexander was bad. Lord. Oh boy. Whew. Let me see. Where is this? Let me see this. Right. A murder a day under a state of emergency. 30 SOE murders for the month of March. 30 people have been murdered in the country since the latest state of emergency was declared. This was the figure provided by DCP Suzette Martin yesterday when she was contacted for comment on the latest homicides which occurred in San Fernando and Valencia on Friday. She said motives would first have to be determined for the murders, but a number of killings committed during the state of emergency, which was declared last month, were gang-related, while others involved people in other criminal activities. She said the police were concerned about all murders, especially those taking place during the SOE. And it just goes to show how lawless our land can be at times. Lawless dump. The murder toll for the year so far stood at 92 last night. This was 2 days ago. Okay. Speaking at the media briefing at the police admin building along Edward Street, Police Service Media Ambassador Owie Russell said data for the period March 3rd to 23rd showed reductions in some offenses when compared with a similar period during the previous SOE. Sexual offenses stood at 13 as compared to 54 recorded during the first 3 weeks of the last SOE. I would want to say to the TTPS or to the wider population, while there may be a reduction in the number of reported crimes, that doesn't mean that it's not happening, right? Some people say it's a waste of time to go to the police because what? They will take the report and there's nothing going to happen, so I just hush my mouth. Kidnapping for ransom accounted for one reported case, while house break-ins totaled 50, down from 74. Robberies also declined with 51 incidents as compared to 125 in the previous period. Again, we need to look at people reporting when they are robbed. However, he noted that home invasions had increased, adding that investigations into those incidents were ongoing. Murder Day. There's a calypso. Murder Day, I think, is Lady Adana, I think, sang that song. My oh my. More things change. Let me get this here. Law students upset with proposed move to DB campus, just like the last time when the People's Partnership was in power. They want to force the campus down there and the students are no, we don't want it. Students of the Faculty of Law at the University of the West Indies are pushing back against a proposed relocation to the DB South campus, calling for an urgent meeting with stakeholders, including Land and Legal Affairs Minister Saddam Hussein, Tertiary Education and Skills Training Minister Professor Prakash Prasad, the UWI principals, and the officials at the law faculty. Students say that they felt blindsided by a March 18th email from the dean indicating what they claimed was a mandated move to the DB campus by August 2026. They view the relocation as a breach of contract. In an interview with Guardian Media yesterday, students said they enrolled in and are paying for a 3-year full-time face-to-face program at the St. Augustine campus with no clause indicating possible relocation. They argued that any sudden shift to DB, especially with proposals for hybrid delivery, goes against what they agreed to. What we are suggesting is that if it is that you are so insistent on having the faculty move, we are not against it, but let the persons who signed the contract finish their term, and new persons who are coming in, let them go across, said a concerned student who asked not to be named. Due to concerns with staffing and logistics, the student said UE was exploring a hybrid approach, teaching online and in person, but students are not in agreement. Students are not paying for a hybrid degree. Again, the contract says it's a face-to-face degree, and the issue for law faculty is that we are required to have 93 credits in order to graduate, which means we have to do our co-curricular, which are other faculties. So if it is we have to move to DB and we have to come to another class during the day, that isn't feasible. Noting that traveling would also be a major challenge for some students, the students said that if they are forced to complete their degree at the DB campus, they ought to be refunded or compensated. Students' frustration is compounded by what they describe as conflicting information from major stakeholders, and the students claim they have been warned of possible consequences for protesting or speaking publicly. Raul is a dictator, BNM is a dictatorship, but students are now being threatened and told, allegedly, being warned of possible consequences for protesting or speaking publicly. We want to be heard, which is why we are requesting a meeting with everyone involved, a student said. In a letter dated March 20th to students, UE Academic Affairs Committee stated that a town hall, whether physical or online, is not being facilitated due to concerns regarding student safety and the potential for media presence to misrepresent or sensationalize discussions, but students can request one-on-one meetings with the dean and deputy dean to address their concerns. Interesting. So the students saying they don't want to go there. Kamala saying, well, they go in there. And she said, she told early on in her prime ministership, she told the principal up at UE, don't test me. I remember that? Don't test me. Because, right. We also saw where the government, gosh, I don't have enough time. We will discuss that next week. But just to mention, right, then the government has stated they are not supporting the reappointment of Dr. Carla Burnett as the CARICOM Secretary General, right, citing all kind of reasons, threatening to withhold funding from CARICOM. Mrs. Prasad again needs to bear in mind that next year she will become the president or the chairman of CARICOM. So we'll see how that will operate. However, one must wonder if, notwithstanding the reason given by Minister Sean Sobers in the Parliament in the last sitting as to why there was no support, because he's saying, well, you know, Trinidad and Tobago was not informed and so on. But Mrs. Prasad Bisessa, what is being reported is that the matter was discussed at the retreat that took place in St. Kitts after the official plenary session. And Mrs. Prasad Bisessa was the only prime minister who was not present because she bust out. After she went and she buff up, she met with Marco for 15 minutes or whatever. She buff up CARICOM leaders, got no applause, and then jumped on a plane and came back home. And she missed the retreat where everybody was wearing their CARICOM shirt and so on. She wasn't there at that session where the matter was discussed. So whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? But one must not forget that I believe it was at the same event in St. Kitts when Dr. Burnett was speaking and she was referencing and congratulating all of the prime ministers who would have won recent elections in CARICOM. She omitted to mention Trinidad and Tobago. So she mentioned St. Vincent and the Grenadines, she mentioned St. Lucia and whatever else, but Trinidad and Tobago was not mentioned. And I don't know if perhaps our government, our prime minister, our minister of CARICOM and foreign affairs felt slighted, felt disrespected because Dr. Burnett did not mention Kamala Prasad Bisessa and the UNC in her speech. And I played the video for you all some time ago, and they say, well, I saw, all right, we ain't supporting you. They're petty like that, I could tell you, they're petty like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the underlying motive and they're giving us some cock and bull story about, oh, they didn't know and they weren't informed. But we'll talk about that on another note. Meanwhile, based on a question that was posed in the Senate by opposition Senator General John Bates, inquiring into the cost of the Flavor Village, the much touted Flavor Village that was the epicenter of Carnival for the UNC, right? Where they had all of these artists, Marshall and Bungie and everybody that he could think about. And we were told, this is just the artists giving back. And then we heard Marshall Montano in his press conference talk about, well, he'll be compensated and, So when we felt it was free, yeah, it was free to you all, but it's going to cost you $16 million. $16 million. And only 172,000 of that 16 million went to providing temporary employment. So we're still looking at 16 million. That needs to be explained. Where did that 16 million go? What was it spent on? We want to know. So Senator Bates is now asking for a detailed breakdown of how and where that 16 million was spent. So it still cost you taxpayers. Yes, you didn't have to dip in your pocket directly, but that is 16 million that if the PNM was in power and had spent that 16 million for Flavor Village, over here, but they could have spent that money to fix the roads. The roads bad, they could have spent that money hospital to buy medication in the hospital, and they could have spent that money to buy laptops and spend that money in the schools, because UNC supporters always know all the alternatives that the money could be spent on. That's what we would have heard. They only want to pay, they don't want to pay the public servants. They want to get them 4%, but they could spend 16 million. They could have taken that 16 million and pay public servants. Meanwhile, we are being told that the public servants will get their back pay in mostly non-cash. We're talking about bonds. And even that will be paid over a period of years. So all was banking on that. Yeah, I'm going to get a big back pay and I get that. I'm going to do this and buy car and do this and fix my house. Yeah, you're going to get it incrementally over the course of at least 2 years. Sadly. So you gave your vote on credit, and now the person you gave the credit to wants to change the terms of the loan to suit them, not you. So your money, well, your vote jumping up in steel band, as they say. But you still had to wait 4 years and 3 months, or 4 years and 4 months at best. August 2030 is the latest they could call the election. All right? Before you could do something about it. So you could gripe and complain all you want, but yeah. Never a dull moment in Sweet Yet. With this administration. Let's see what else here I could just touch on quickly. Caribbean Airlines is seeking a financial bailout from the government to counter the rising cost of fuel as a result of the US-Israel war against Iran and its impact on the carrier's operational costs. Guardian Media understands that the CAL board put forward several options to the Ministry of Finance during a meeting 2 weeks ago to cushion the airline. The introduction of a fuel charge on tickets, or surcharge on tickets. And this is the surcharge government, right? Because we have the landlord surcharge that they introduced. The removal of the subsidy on the air bridge. So instead of paying $400, you will pay maybe $6, $7, depending on what the price of jet fuel is. And an increase in the overall cost of tickets and a further slashing of lower revenue routes. So we call ourselves an international airline, but we want to reduce our international footprint and our international reach is one of the methods, so one of the options that they're proposing. Increase in the overall cost of tickets, so I imagine not just on the local air bridge, but the international air bridge as well. I see some other airlines are looking to increase the cost of checked luggage. Right, so I think now you pay like $40. I think it's $40 for the first bag, $50 for the second one, and most airlines only allow you 2 unless you're in business class or first class and so on. And additional is significantly more, like $150 to $250 US, right? And I understand that the Chief Secretary is not in support of this, particularly the proposal to increase the cost of tickets on the domestic air bridge. $400 well, we don't know how much that could go up to. And the likelihood is that if they increase it, even when the situation with US, Israel, Iran is sorted out, and fuel prices or gas prices, oil prices come back down, there is still no guarantee that you're going to see a reversion to what the current prices are assuming. But clearly, Carl needs help, and these are the options. So whatever option the government looks at is going to affect your pocket for those of us who travel, who fly, right? But I don't normally fly with Caribbean Airlines when I go international. Usually I fly with American or JetBlue, right? No issues really with Caribbean. I just, yeah. But I went with them this time, and the food left much to be desired, but it is what it is. All right, so yeah, seems more increases coming your way. Also, I see that the cabinet approved an increase for the TTPS, the request to increase the rates that they charge for officers when they have to work extra duty for parties and so on. So again, it's going to hit your pockets too, because when who they charge, the TTPS will send a bill to the FET promoters, the FET organizers, and of course the FET organizers are going to pass on that increased cost to you, the patrons. So you can expect to pay more for your tickets. So who really winning under the UNCA? Who really winning? Not even their own supporters winning. Right? But they're quiet, they don't understand, because they were convinced that their party was the better option. Suffering from cognitive dissonance. Yeah? The UNC, best thing out. PNM is a dictator, PNM oppressing the poor. As I told you earlier yesterday, when my office staff and I, when we went out yesterday to deliver the hampers, so that we can have, rather than have the people come to the office, we could go to their homes, see what their living conditions are like and what assistance we could render. And I tell you, it's tough. Most of the people that we went to unemployed, they've been looking for work for the longest while. It's not that they don't want to work, they're not lazy. They're trying, they're sending out resumes, they're filling out applications, but no work. Because the amount of people that out there that are looking for work is mind-blowing. Right? So, thanks to your government. But they're increasing the cost of everything. And that $1, I can tell you that at the current prices, soon that $1 reduction that you got in super, again, is going to cost you indirectly. Because while the government may not be inclined, for political reasons only, to add back on the dollar or more, is going to be covered in subsidy. And I asked the minister last year when he made that announcement, but he left the chamber at the time, whether or not that $1 decrease in the price of super, if that was the full gamut. Because he said the reason for the decrease was at the price of fuel that time, that what we were paying at the pump was more than what the cost of a liter of super actually was, or it was costing the state to import. Now, with what is happening with that war and the price of oil and what the cost of fuel is, because I can tell you I felt it at the pump in the US. Yeah, I normally would pay like $3.19, $3.10 a gallon. Now it's between $4.19 and $4.99. Is what I paid this time. Right? So whereas I would normally spend like maybe $30, 30 something US to fill up the gas tank, it cost me over $60 US this time. So while the gas that or the fuel that we may have now would have been purchased, because remember they ordered this they would purchase the gas in advance, right? So at what the prevailing prices were. So in January, they were probably buying enough fuel to last maybe 3-4 months at the prevailing prices for it to be delivered at a future date. But when that is delivered and is used up, any future going further on in the year, new purchases would be purchased at the existing prices that they are today, or what they are at that point in time. So, which means that the subsidy is going to be bigger. So based on current prices, if this situation isn't sorted out soon, it means that what we will be paying at the pump for super might be well below what the actual cost is, and the government will either have to tack back on that $1 plus or absorb, which means that any gains that we may get from any increases in the price of oil or the price of natural gas will be eaten up in subsidies rather than the government using it to either realize a budget surplus or to benefit you, the citizens. Because we see what's happening in the nation's hospitals. Nurses are protesting. We saw what is happening with the North Central Regional Health Authority under Tim Gopi Singh, claiming that nurses making all kind of $80,000 a month, but up to now we can't see a single nurse for them to prove that. Meanwhile, citizens are suffering. The same UNC supporters who was complaining about the health sector under the PNM, and you go and you can't get medication, and you can't this and you can't that. Now you can't get a nurse. I know people who were discharged from the hospital because they were there. These are people who were very sick, and because the nurses weren't showing up, they're struggling. They didn't make this. It don't make sense we leave you here for you to die. We are getting reports from the Nursing Association that persons have lost their lives in the nation's hospital as a result of this situation with the nurses. Right, when in a certain area there was a patient and there was no nurse there to attend, and the individual subsequently passed on. Right, but all those who were complaining under the PNM 10 years about the state of the health sector and so bad and this and that, where are they now? They're quiet. And anybody who decides to speak out and to challenge you, here. So where was for the last 10 years? It was quiet. It wasn't saying nothing for the last 10 years. Okay, so if you had a problem, people not saying anything for the last 10 years, you decide, well, you're going to be quiet now? You were very vocal. It's the same health sector. Come out and talk about it. But no, you can't make your government look bad. No, because the UNC was supposed to be the savior of this country. And they've been anything but for the last 11 months. Anything but the savior of this country. That's why you have so many people won back their vote. So many people coming on social media and expressing regret for having given them their vote. I see so many people posted on Facebook over the last couple of days. They've never seen all the years so many political bullies all over the country for Good Friday. Never see so many. There's bullies of Kamla, bullies of Alexander and Wayne Sturge and Padarat. Interestingly, I didn't see any with any opposition bullies. I didn't see any. Maybe there might have been, probably in some UNC constituencies, because they just, I didn't see any pictures posted. So if you all know, send it. I didn't see any. It speaks a lot. In less than a year, and the population sharing blows. I saw a few of Felicia, or Felicia as they call her as well, who also has gone quiet. We're going all the people back pay. She eating her food, drinking her juice and belching, and she's PSA president, she on state board. So she liking herself, she had time to all you. Well, I get 10%, hush all them out, no back pay all you want. You get it in due course. Eat little and live long. Eat little and live long. I tell you. Good we? Anyway. Oh, that's the... So, folks, we will chat again very soon. All right. Yeah, I'll see if what my timing allows for tomorrow. If not, well, next week. So enjoy the rest of your holiday, your long weekend. And we'll chat soon. As I said, I must now run off to another event. All right. So take care.